Hi, everybody. I'm Brooke. This is Conversations with Brooke. Today, we are going to dig into a subject that is really common in religious cults and backgrounds. So, part of it is that there's this idea that because you're in that your relationship with God puts you above the law. It's in um, a lot of different religions, and it's not like it's specifically like written within their books, but they act in a way that because you have some deeper relationship with God than the average person, that it puts you above the law. So there's a couple different ways that this actually plays out. So one of them is child labor, and I could dive into a video about that, and I might, but children are often put to work in not okay circumstances at very young ages. Legally, that is not allowed, actually. There's a reason that children are not allowed to legally work until a certain age. But if you've come from a particular background, oftentimes kids are put to work at very young ages under very intense circumstances, everything from construction to house cleaning. So we could say that there's a normal level of having to do chores around your house for your parents, and sometimes some parents pay you for it, and sometimes some parents don't pay you for it. When you live in when you've grown up in a certain cult, like for example, with my situation, what we had is that at very young ages, we were not just made to clean. You know, as kids, we were made to clean, but I wasn't just cleaning my house. I was cleaning the minister's house on my hands and knees by the age of, like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old. Doing dishes, cleaning bathrooms. We had to clean the floors on our hands and knees because that was a more spiritual way to get to God. Because if you did it, for some reason, I don't know why a mop was inefficient, but we had to clean. We used to regularly have to clean baseboards. We had to wash walls. We had to clean toilets without toilet brushes. We were expected to use our hands and rags. So that was a normal thing as the girls. The guys had to regularly be put to work physically, so that would be construction. In my particular upbringing, there was actually a construction company. I think my brother went to work at 12. He looked older because he was, he had what we joked about at one point calling, big guy syndrome, where if you look like you're bigger, you're one of those people who's always asked to help move the couch. It doesn't matter how old you are. But so he went to construction at a very young age. And same thing happened with, everybody else generally who grew up, except for the minister's children. So that was always interesting. But there's a reason that there's laws for that kind of stuff. The other thing, and it's also a place where it begins to create the separation. So, there's been cults that have played out for years where different government entities have gone in because of things that were going on. There's a reason that you're not allowed to marry somebody who's under the age of 18. Because if you're not 18, you're not old enough to give consent for yourself. Of course, your parents can technically do it. But that's another thing that happens. That's not something that specifically happened in mine. But I know different people that, that children were put in relationships with people at too young of an age. Actually, within mine, there were people who were put in relationships at really young ages. Many of them were at least with somebody who was also of a similar age, but there was a few that weren't. So that's another thing where it's like, that is illegal for a reason. But when you're in these different religious environments, they act as if God puts them in a position that they're above having to listen to that. And another way that it ended up playing out, is that we always had this consistent, we used to have different lawsuits and different fights and different, with different entities. So one of the things that had happened for a long time was, the sheriff in Maricopa County, not Maricopa County, in Gila County, there was this ongoing battle with him because we were the way that, because we were odd, and because Waco happened, which was a very public incident, it put more emphasis on how odd our group was. Now, we didn't have a compound. There was a lot of people who were in separate homes. There was more than one family in a lot of the homes, but we were also in a small town, so there was a lot of attention to the fact that we were different. Now, we dressed normally. We dressed like any other person. But there was different incidents where, being in a small town with some small-minded people, there was some incidents where there was, threats from local people in the area. And when we went to get help from the sheriff wouldn't help us. So that caused more of a wedge between this idea that there's this us versus them mentality, but that you can't depend on the law anyway. So there's all these different ways that this stuff begins to play out. So it puts you in this position that you feel like that you're different than other people, but you also, if you're not careful, you feel like you're superior because you have this idea that God put you above all this stuff. There's laws for a reason, and they're meant to keep you safe. And if you're in an environment where you think that you're above them, that's dangerous. They're there for you and your kids for a purpose. And learning to take a different look at your experience with the legal system is a very important thing, especially if you've been taught one way. The way that we get taught, it really wires in us, and you have to create habits to begin to rethink the way that you relate with these things, because it's damaging. It's damaging. So part of it is just trying to figure out how to relook at those types of situations. And then because we had a lot of attorneys, we had a lot of different lawsuits about some of these issues. And some of them, I remember being a teenager, and one of the things that I remember, and this is something that people have too, is the epiphanies about how what you're raised in doesn't fit. But I remember that they always talked about righteousness and being in integrity. That was a big one that they used in my teaching. It was, that you have to be in integrity. So it trained everybody to always be in this place of searching to be a certain way, which should be a good thing. But they were not in integrity most of the time. So because of this, it was one of the things that I began noticing that began opening my eyes about things at a young age. But there's this point where you either dig in or you leave. And a lot of times, if you don't have the catalyst to make you leave, you're just going to dig in deeper. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense about, legal stuff and getting involved, and, how there's laws out there that are there to protect us because of these upbringings with faith. They end up pushing us farther away. And as always, if you'd like to get a free blueprint, make sure you go to 100yearsofblissquiz.com. That's 100yearsofblissquiz.com. And I look forward to connecting with you, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.